Good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. I am Paula Nettleship, and on behalf of the Association of Pittsburgh Priests and Pathways to Lay Leadership, I'd like to welcome you to our speaker series. This evening, our speaker is Dr. Phyllis Zagano, and she will be talking about how we can be church. I want to thank behind the scenes, Jim Ruck, Gretchen Jerzyk, Jim McCarville, John Flaherty, kind of keeping everything running smoothly for us. As you heard, we're recording this session, so you can go to the APP website in a week or so to see, follow up with the recording if you wanted to just revisit some thought. You can also check us out. We have a YouTube channel, and we've loaded some of our older presentations up on YouTube. It's all one word when you go to YouTube to search Association of Pittsburgh Priests. No spaces. If you put some spaces in, you're going to kind of get some wonky stuff. So again, just one long word, Association of Pittsburgh Priests on YouTube to see this talk and some of our other presentations. I think we're going to begin, if we can put the opening slide up, Gretchen. This is kind of how we run most of our sessions. It's going to follow a familiar format for all of you. We open everything in prayer. Then Dr. Zagano will give her presentation for about 30 minutes. We will go do some breakout sessions for another 15 minutes or so. Come back for an open forum where we can pose some questions to Dr. Zagano, give her some time for some closing remarks, and then we will close in prayer. I'm just going to remind everyone to please mute themselves if they're not speaking. If you have any questions or thoughts, you can put them in the chat. We have people looking at chat, or you can go to the bottom of your Zoom toolbar under reactions. There's an option to raise a hand for some people. I don't have that option, so I would put something in chat. If you don't see it, please put it in chat. We have people looking at both sort of forms. That's kind of it that we have for business right now. So I am just going to ask Father Vince Stegman to open us with the prayer.
Lord God, be with us so that we might not look forward in fear to changes in life. We are your very own, and we believe that you will lead us safely through all things. And when we cannot stand it, you'll carry us in your arms. May we be at peace and so put aside all anxious thoughts and imaginations. In this peace, we know that the love of God surrounds us, the light of God shines in us, the Spirit of God hovers over us, the presence of God enfolds us, and wherever we are, God is. We ask all this through Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, family like us, now and forever. Amen.
Thanks, Vince. And then Sister Barbara Finch will be introducing Dr. Zagano.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Phyllis Zagano. Phyllis is an internationally acclaimed Catholic scholar who has lectured throughout the United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia. She's received many awards, but one in particular I would like to highlight in 2014 is the Isaac Hecker Award for Social Justice from the Paula Center community in Boston. And it's because that Phyllis has constantly echoed the cry of the poorest of our society for dignity and the justice both inside and outside the church, and in particular, the dignity of all women. Her groundbreaking work on women in the diaconate led her to an appointment to the Pontifical Commission for the Study of the Diaconate of Women in 2016. She is taught at Fordham, Boston, and Yale Universities, and is currently at Hofstra University on research appointment. Her present newest book is Women Icons of Christ, which examines the historical and theological evidence for the ministry of women ordained as Catholic deacons. And then personally, I would just like to note that Phyllis came to Pittsburgh many years ago. We sponsored her from our call to action. And Phyllis has constantly been very prophetic. She speaks the truth for all these years about the historical existence of women deacons. And so we commend her for her work, and we give you Phyllis.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I have to say that the title that was given me, "How Can We Be Church? Prophetic, Outcry, or Policy and Law," is it's a tough one. It's a tough one for all of us because we all live in the already but not yet, and we all hope for something better. I actually had forgotten why I was in Pittsburgh. I know I was in Pittsburgh in 2002, and I also know that I got there at LaGuardia Airport through a storm that was so severe it was green. The sky was green, and all sorts of consternations. At one point, I was going to fly to Washington and sleep on the floor in the airport and get an dark 30 to Pittsburgh just to get there. But I'm delighted to speak with you in Pittsburgh. I'm sorry I'm not there in Pittsburgh because it's a beautiful city. You know, the question about how to be church, it can go in a lot of directions. And I think the opposition that has been set up for me today is the question of the collision between the law and the prophets. And, you know, when you remember in Numbers, Moses saying, if only all the people of the Lord were prophets, if only the Lord would bestow his spirit on them. And as we approach Pentecost, you know, that's my prayer for you as you continue. John Osterley sent me this book, which I read. And now I know why I wasn't in it, because it was a call to action talk, not a APP talk that I was giving in 2002. So, you know, when you think of it, the collision between the law and the prophets, you know, the question does answer itself, because when the Spirit speaks, and the Spirit speaks through people, as I'm sure you and many others feel, the Spirit has spoken through you over the past 50 plus years since the founding of the Association of Pittsburgh Priests. You know, I think you find yourself in league with my favorite saint, St. Catherine of Siena, who's one of the prophets. She broke book no opposition. She wrote, I think it's 408 letters that we know of, and she didn't stop, and she didn't stop speaking. She, as you know, convinced the Pope to stop living in the south of France, if you'll excuse me, and move back to Rome to get to work. She's a doctor of the church, and when you think about Catherine and what went on in her time, we're in very much a time like that. In her Middle Ages, was terrible corruption in the church. There were other reformers. The Protestant Reformation, of course, was starting. But the Black Death, the bubonic plague, was raging in Catherine's territory, and she buried the dead. She nursed the sick. And the Black Death actually impacted negatively on the power of the clergy, because, you know, they could preach, but to whom? And what good did their preaching do relative to the illness? And so the people, like the people of today, the people of medieval Europe, had the same question. You know, who do we listen to? Do we pay attention to the prophets? Do we pay attention to the people who are presenting errors, presenting what they say are errors? Do we pay attention to people who say they are presenting the truth? Or do we simply pay attention to the law? And then if we talk about law, well, which law? And if we talk about prophets, well, which prophets, you know? I think that as in Catherine's time, the law and the prophets seem to be in complete collision. Now, to be honest, today's church doesn't seem to be working very well. There's fracture, there's factions, there's infighting, there's all sorts of insults and around the whole church, actually, the people of God, all of us, that's you and that's me, in my little town, we have to figure out how to go forward. And we have to figure out how to go forward as one. And so the new buzzword, if you will, is synodality. And it's a very interesting term because it's how the whole church once did make decisions. And I think it's the way the Holy Father, Pope Francis, wants to make decisions again. You know, it requires discernment. It requires prayerful discernment. And it does not require parliamentary procedure. And that's the difference in Catholic circles or in Christian circles on how we are to move forward. Now, with synodality, you know, what it means is a kind of a mutual discernment. It's a collaborative discussion that brings about synodality. It's a prayerful reflection on a topic and it's so distinctive that the Holy Father has made it the topic of the next meeting of the Synod of Bishops. So we have a synod on synodality. And you know that the Synod of Bishops, as a standing body, actually was created in 1965, after at the start, actually, of the fourth meeting of the Second Vatican Council. And in setting it up, Pope Paul VI felt that he needed an advisory body of bishops to discuss the various topics of deep interest and really topics of great concern to the church. So since then, as you know, various synods have met. Francis, just before Francis became Pope, there was a synod on the new evangelization. And that's another kind of buzzword that we find in church circles today. But the ordinary synod on young people in 2018 was preceded by a new constitution for synods. And what the Holy Father did, what Pope Francis did, was he changed the norms for calling a synod. So, and it's a pretty high document that he used to make this announcement. Anyway, what he says in the synod is that the bishop is both teacher and disciple. He is teacher when endowed with the special assistance of the Holy Spirit. He proclaims to the faithful the word of truth in the name of Christ, head and shepherd. But he's a disciple when, knowing that the Spirit has been bestowed upon every baptized person, he, that is the bishop, listens to the voice of Christ speaking through the entire people of God, making it infallible in credendo, that is, infallible in believing. That's a very, very important point here, that there's the possibility of an infallibility coming from the people of God. And that's something that we need to pay attention to, because I think when you think of it, you know, Catherine of Siena, first of all, is not the only, she's not the only prophet on the block. And it's really everybody. And when you have everybody saying the same thing, you find that you have a prophecy that's coming, perhaps infallible in credendo. So, but that term comes from Lumen Gentium. It comes from the Second Vatican Council. I'm sure since you read about these things that you know that the Second Vatican Council isn't done yet. They say it takes about 100 years for a synod to be completely received. And what the council wrote was that the entire body of the faithful, anointed as they are by the Holy One, cannot err in matters of belief. I wrote just the other day in the National Catholic Reporter that what the Holy Father is interested in is having Catholics pick up their baptismal promises and run with them. So now the problem that a lot of people have brought up is, well, you know, we only have bishops at a synod of bishops. And that's true. We only have bishops at a synod of bishops because they're called synods of bishops. I don't know if the synod in 2022 on synodality will have any different specs, will have different formation. But I do know that Sister Nathalie Beccart, who is a sister from Paris, has been named an undersecretary of the synod. So I would say stay tuned on that. Now, you know that the most recent synod that we've had was the Amazon Synod, Synod of Bishops for the Pan-Amazon region. It was a special assembly, actually, and it asks a lot of interesting questions, specifically about the Amazon. Of course, the focus was on matters attended to Fratelli Tutti and to Laudato Si, but it brought up things that people have been talking about for years. It brought up married priesthood, a limited married priesthood. It brought up the installation of women as lectors and acolytes, and it also asked for the continued consideration of the restoration of women to the ordained diaconate. And I think you know that the diaconate, married deacons ordained as priests was postponed, or some say neglected. The women deacons question was sent to another commission, and the question of lectors and acolytes was brought to the floor and brought to the fore. And January 10th of this year, the Holy Father changed Canon 230, paragraph 1, to install, to say that women as well as men could be installed as lectors and acolytes. Now, there are controversies about voting and not voting relative to the synod, but my feeling is that if you're going to have a synod of bishops, then it's a synod of bishops. And the Holy Father did expand the most recent synod. He had about 100 others there as experts, as auditors, there was complaint that women were not given the vote, despite the fact that they were there, and that men were given the vote who were not priests, despite the fact that they were there. And, you know, for technical reasons, you can argue that the head of a religious order of men is the equivalent of an abbot, is the equivalent of a bishop. But that's what happened. And the USG, the Union of Superiors General of Men, purposefully named 2 of their 10 delegates who were religious brothers. And I think one of them at least was not even the head of his order, but they had votes. So that's the way it is. Even so, the canon law says that a synod of bishops is a synod of bishops. It's a group of bishops chosen from different regions. And then, as I said, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, has added special guests, special invited guests, such as I described earlier. Now, it's certainly borne out in church law that the only opinions that counted at the Synod of Bishops, the most recent, were those of the clerics. And that's kind of creates a lot of heartburn to the people of God, but I think it also creates a lot of heartburn to the Holy Father, who has been working very assiduously to add women to positions of authority throughout. I was reading the Annuario Pontific, the Pontifical Annual, the book, big red book of who works where in the Vatican, and it doesn't list Sister Nuria Kalduk as the new president of the Pontifical Biblical Commission, but she has just been named that. And I was interested to see that the prior president of the Pontifical Biblical Commission was Cardinal Ladaria, the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. So I think for, you know, a woman religious who's a fine scholar to replace a cardinal on a pontifical commission is moving in the right direction. In any event, you know, canon law is on the other side of the equation here. And canon law has continually and consistently erected a fence between lay people, lay men and women, keeping us away from policy and away from sacrament. And yet, when we look at the tension in historical lens, we have to recognize that it's not a new tension. It's not a new tension at all. It's now a tension voiced by professional journals. It's a tension voiced by academics, and it's a tension voiced by the general public in social media. Now, but the question is, now are some of these people, the professionals and the amateurs, prophets? You know, do they or any one of them proclaim the will of God. You see, there's a lot of chatter. First question, who's listening? But if we think the whole church, including the people of God, may be listening, the question is, who are they paying attention to? Who do the members of the synods of bishops pay attention to? Who does the Pope pay attention to? Who depends on law? Who depends on prophets? Okay. So let's look at law. We have to recognize the Catholic Church is ruled by law. In fact, the church has the oldest continuous legal system in the world. There are several iterations of canon law. They talk about the ancient law, the new law. The new code of canon law, it was promulgated in 1983, and it replaced the 1917 code of canon law. But let me tell you, many of the sections of the 1983 code of canon law simply write the laity right out of the church. The bedrock of clerical control is Canon 129, paragraph 2. Now, when that canon was being debated, there were two schools of thought. There was the so-called German school, and there was the Roman school. The Roman school wanted to say that, lay persons could share in the exercise of power. The German school wanted the canon to say lay persons could cooperate in the exercise of power. And the German school won the vote. They won 52 votes to exclude lay persons from the exercise of power, potestas, and therefore from obtaining any kind of jurisdiction in the church. Now, the concept of including laity in governance and jurisdiction got 9 votes. So, Canon 129, which regulates the power of governance, also called the power of jurisdiction, reads, quote, lay members of the Christian faithful can cooperate in the exercise of this same power according to the norm of law. And that canon was written by then Archbishop Joseph Ratzinger. Now, the point is, there's no workaround in 129, paragraph 2. The law is the law, and the law dictates that laity are permitted to cooperate, not share governance and jurisdiction. And I'll tell you, as I read your history, which John Osterley kindly sent to me, I could see the tension between some of your bishops and your organization. Because as your organization became a mixed clerical and lay organization, it seems to me, at least, as an outsider reading your book quickly, it seems to me, at least, that the bishops increasingly ignored your organization. That early on, the bishops were only too happy to have conversations with other clerics, but as more and more lay people became part of the mix, they backed off. Now, that can be due to personalities, it could be due to circumstances, could be due to some of the issues that you espoused, but it's clear in the trajectory of the progressive voice in the Catholic Church in the United States, the Association of Pittsburgh Priests, 1966 to 2009 by Arthur MacDonald, that there was an increasing movement away from your group. And the point is, there's no workaround. There's absolutely no workaround to Canon 129, paragraph 2. The law is the law, and the law dictates laity are permitted to cooperate, but not share in governance and jurisdiction, and that spills over. So now there are 2 responses to this barrier, this clerical fence that's erected around the powers of governance and jurisdiction. One is to walk away, and the other is to stay and complain. So, I think we see a lot of people walking away for many reasons. On the right, there are a lot of individuals who are fueled by, their ire is fueled by blogs and news media that proclaim authentic belief. And you know them, I don't have to listen, LifeSite News, Eternal Word Television Network, The Wanderer, a few others. And on the left, there are other organizations that are almost equally as noisy, and they're angry in a way against the right. You have Catholics for Choice, New Ways Ministry, certain newspapers. In the middle, you've got older journals and maybe older individuals who are trying to keep the peace. But the issues that they all discuss seem to have to do with sex and marriage. Divorce, remarriage, contraception, homosexual relationships come to mind. And each of the outlets that we see falls on one side or the other. It's almost like there's no dialogue at all. You could take, it's not as serious, well, it's a terrible analogy. But when you see a war and there's two sides and they won't dialogue, there's almost nothing that can happen. You know what happened with the problem of abortion. And in the U.S. Catholic Conference of Catholic Bishops, the various dissent within the conference of the pre-election statement that abortion is a preeminent priority. And that whole conversation about President Biden to bar him from communion with bishops who are not his pastors, not his bishops, not his diocesan bishops, either from Delaware or from Washington, D.C., making comments on really what's a personal discussion that one assumes he's having with his own bishop. But without parsing that argument, I have to say my position is that accepting the law of the land is not the same as moral cooperation with abortion. I may be wrong. I'm not happy with President Biden's stance, for example, on the Hyde Amendment, but I think the answer is for him to discuss things privately, and for us, for people who recognize the terror of abortion, the horror of abortion, is to voice our opinions in the proper fora. I worked for Cardinal John O'Connor for many years. He used to say that individuals who have abortions are invincibly ignorant. If they really knew what they were doing, they could never do it. And he felt that the individuals responsible for the invincible ignorance were the individual bishops of their diocese. I have to tell you, I don't think bishops screaming at the top of their lungs is helpful. I think it's more helpful for them to spend more attention on the gospel and try to inculcate gospel values in people. My objection is genuinely about the proposed rupture of the Hyde Amendment to take my tax money to pay for abortion. But anyway, you know the field, you know the issues. And in large part, the problem is that they've created political discussion over moral questions. Now, but getting back to the question of power, the exercise of power, as far as the participation in governance and jurisdiction is within the church, okay, the law says laity cannot exercise governance and jurisdiction. And so we have prophets, okay? If you're not inside the system and you can't affect it, then you're outside the system and you're speaking about it. As you must know, it's the right and the duty of the laity to make their needs known to the hierarchy. I have a footnote here, a Canon 212, paragraph 2. The Christian faithful are free to make known to the pastors of the church their needs, especially spiritual ones, and their desires. It's almost a command now with Pope Francis. He has said elsewhere, he said to young people, make a mess, create a lot of discussion. And I must say, having lived in his house for about 5 months over a period of 2 years, I can't say that I can't imagine he's disingenuous in that. I do believe that he wishes to have open discussion. They certainly didn't mail me to Rome so that I wouldn't speak. So, and I certainly did. But we know, how we're hurt. We're hurt by the imperious pastor who listens to no one, who dismisses women, one pastor I know of said, don't waste my time with old women, even though they were the backbone of the ministry in the church. Then there's the pastor who smiles through council meetings, pastoral council meetings, and then the list go on and on. And the bishops who ignore the laity and ignore groups like yours are legion. We can't get away from that. But in large part, the people of God depend on the prophets. So in large part, perhaps they're even depending on you individually and as a group. The inspired speakers, okay, or writers who are rooted in the Word of God, that's the most important part, rooted in the Word of God, who address the situation, whatever it is, directly and forcefully. But then there are many false prophets, okay, and they're more than enough to confuse things. I think that the internal matters and the external matters we know about, we think about, we pray about, we talk about. Will the problem of abortion be solved? No. Will the problem of the environment be solved? No. Do we hope that it will? Yes, of course we do. Of course we do. Internal voices, I think, are also subject to prophetic voices. The question of the place of women in the church, to my mind, echoes the maltreatment of women in too many societies. Too many societies. Think, for example, think of the women forced into menstruation huts in Nepal, or the women who were subject to dowry burning, or to kitchen fire deaths in India, or the women now sterile because of childhood female genital mutilation in any one of a number of African or Eastern countries. Now, not one of these women can look to St. Peter's Basilica and see a woman proclaiming the gospel there. Neither can the women in Australia, in the United States, or in the United Kingdom, or in any South American or European Union nation easily find a trained woman minister supported, and by that I mean paid, by her parish or diocese. More than once, Pope Francis has called for a more incisive presence of women in the church. He's made appointments. There's more to be done. So the question, are women allowed to speak in church or in the church? The interesting point is there's no way for a woman, a trained woman, to preach during the Mass without the pressing questions, external or internal to the church. So there's all sorts of online preaching going on. And this is where, are these real prophets or not? There's Catholic Women Preach, which is online. Australian Women Preach. These will all be joined by more in many languages. As women are continually fenced off from diaconal altar service, the ordained deacon, as you know, is permitted to preach the homily at Mass. And he, and hopefully she, will participate in these Masses. Today, the only way a woman can legally preach at Mass is at a Mass for children. But beyond preaching, how does a woman gain access? How does a woman gain a hearing when she wants to fulfill her right and duty as canon law rules to make known to the pastors of the church their needs? I think at least part of the answer depends upon a given culture. And unfortunately, the culture of clericalism that infects every level of the clergy is not helping. So just for a minute, recall the problems Dorothy Day had with the Archdiocese of New York over her use of the term the Catholic worker, not to mention some of her comments about poverty, about hunger, and about war. The place of women in the church is an ongoing discussion, fraught with anger and misinformation. In my own diocese, the director of deacon personnel has falsely stated that Pope Francis does not want the question of women deacons discussed. And boy, I was amazed to hear that. So if clericalism is the fence, and Pache, the clerics who are with us tonight, how can people get prophetic messages across? How can the people of God leverage the message of prophets to get the hierarchy to pay attention and to act? I think the answer is to the tension between the law as it has constrained the church and the overanxious prophets who perhaps want to throw the law into the Bible is discernment. Consider, if you will, the possibility that the law is the guardrail keeping the prophets from crashing over the cliff, or that the law is the training wheels keeping the prophets on the straight and narrow. There are many so-called false prophets. They're only too happy to take up your time. But there are true prophets, ones whose words may challenge structure or tradition, ones who seek to build up rather than tear down. They're all around us. The problem is to seek out those who use the law as a guide and not as a baseball bat. That's where the entire church is called to discern what's possible, to discern between the good and the bad. And the process, whether individually or as part of a group. Remember the Holy Father's interest in synodality. The process requires facts and understandings of the questions the prophets may be presenting, along with the facts and understandings of the law. So what's discernment? It's a term taken from the spiritual exercises of Ignatius Loyola, founder of the Society of Jesus of the Jesuits. Ignatius presents a methodology for careful discernment. The process is delicate, but it's not complex. As you know, part of Ignatius's teaching involves the good angel and the evil spirit, each of whom is capable of exciting the soul. The mark of the evil spirit is to give the appearance of the good angel, the good prophet. But Ignatius warns, if a good person carefully follows the logic, the train of thought, if you will, of the evil spirit, the result is desolation. When I lecture on spirituality, I like to tell students that telling point of failed ideas presented by the evil spirit is that, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And good people can discern bad ideas quickly. Good people can figure out who the false prophets are. Good people can figure out who's using the law as a baseball bat. It's disturbing. It's like water falling on a stone. A wise bishop once wrote to me about discernment. He said, it's not an organizational technique. It's not even a passing fashion. It's an interior attitude rooted in an act of faith. Discernment is the method and at the same time the goal. It is based on the belief that God is at work in the history of the world, in the events of life, in the people we meet and speak to us. And that's why we're called to listen to what the Spirit suggests to us with often unpredictable ways and directions. So the point is discernment, but the question is who to listen to, the law or the prophets. The idea is to head in the right direction, of course. You take advice, you sift through the facts, you make a decision. The cacophony of words and sounds and pictures floods our space in our minds and our lives. But with quiet meditation, I think we can, and you have, in reading your history, understand the difference. The tension between the law and the prophets will always be there. The wish of both the Bible and the church is that all God's people be prophets, and it's real, and it's workable only if speech is informed and if writing is respectful. We know well enough not to get involved with physical violence, but there's a genuine violence taking place every day on the internet, in chat rooms and all manner of social media. When you think of people who present the term China virus, I heard it from a Catholic priest, the Wuhan devil or stolen US presidential elections, the strident, angry denigration of Pope Francis that's coming from the alt-right, has fed an undercurrent of law-wielding clerics metaphorically wearing Benedict is my Pope t-shirts under their 33-button Roman cassocks. But then again, how has the frothy anything goes commentary, which is recently and always attacking Catholic doctrine, how has that created a segment of the church that is in and of itself schismatic? I think here are the breakaway movements like Roman Catholic women priests, which to my mind is the current century's mirror to the Protestant Reformation. So what do? Should we listen to the preacher concentrating on the negative, don't do this, don't do that? Or should we pay more attention when the preaching skirts the law? Well, this is okay under these circumstances. We need to be kind, need to accept everyone. Which is the voice of the Spirit? Now, earlier I mentioned the book of Numbers. In it, the people are angry. They're distraught because they're in foreign land with no comfort, little to eat besides the unappetizing manna. They remember the easier times when they had fish in Egypt and cucumbers and melons and leeks and onions and garlic. They had God's promise in their wandering. They didn't have meat. Why'd they ever leave Egypt? To find an answer to the plight, Moses gathered 70 elders, you'll remember, but even among them, there was no prophecy, no answer. Then the Bible tells us the Spirit came to rest on two men, Eldad and Medad, who were not part of the original gathering, kind of outsiders. Someone complained that these two were prophesying, and Moses declared, if all the people of the Lord were prophets, if only the Lord would bestow his spirit on them. You know, I think like the people in the book of Numbers, the people of the church today are wanderers. There are other prophets. I like Catherine of Siena. You remember, Catherine spent no time on false prophets, on voices that drew people away from the project of synodality who either ignored or abused the law. Catherine also knew she had to speak. She had to speak against the abuses of her day, no matter that more than once she was called to be silent. Her answer was simple. We've had enough exhortations to be silent. Cry out with 1,000 tongues, she wrote. The world is rotten because of silence. So the question was the collision between the law and the prophets. How can we be church? The problem is discerning which position is guided by the Spirit. You know what? It's not easy. No one ever said it would be. Thanks.
I'm going to invite you again that if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Someone's monitoring them and they will relay those questions to the larger group. And or you have an option in your bottom toolbar on Zoom under reactions to kind of raise your hand, and we'll try to get you that way. And I don't think we've seen any questions now, which I kind of find surprising, honestly. So, yeah.
So Paula, I have a question. This is Gretchen.
Great, Gretchen, thanks.
So I just found it very interesting, and I was interested in Dr. Zagano's point of view that, you know, way back, it was the Germans who had vetoed power to the laity. But in today's world, it's actually the Germans who are quite progressive about calling for synodality and a voice for the laity. So I was interested in her perspectives on that.
I wouldn't, what I said was there were two schools during the meetings about the creation of the new code of canon law. And they were loosely called the German school and the Roman school. The German school was headed by Archbishop Ratzinger. I couldn't make that comparison with what's going on in the German church today, because the same discussions are going on in the German church today. And there are many, many German scholars and many, many German clerics and others involved in church work who are equally, if you want to say the word conservative, as to the kind of, if you want to say the word liberal, comments that are coming out in the press. I think that what you're reading is not really reflective of the conversations that are going on in the German Synod. You only get the news flash that, oh, the German Synod wants this, or people in the German Synod wants this. But there is really serious discussion and division today in the German church. And I think it's, the article is written by Elizabeth MacDonald, and it's in the Jurist, and it tells the whole story of that canon and the discussion. And what it is the Roman school kind of wanted that they could share. Partem habere was the word, and the word that won was cooperare, cooperate, and that's there, and it cannot be. You cannot share governance, cannot share jurisdiction. And then if you go further into canon law, there are certain exceptions, like an abbess has jurisdiction and power. So,
Well, I think there were a few questions about canon law, and specifically related to women. You know, if women can't teach, how can they teach children? And I guess the other question was, I missed it. I guess, is it forbidden by canon law? So for women to preach?
Yes, it is. Lay people cannot preach at all. The only person who can legally preach during a mass, preach the homily during a mass, is a cleric, a priest, deacon, or bishop who is actually involved in the mass. The visiting missionary who flies in out of the sacristy for every single mass to preach a homily, that's actually technically illegal. It has to be someone involved in the mass who can do the preaching. The exception is a 1994 ruling from 3 dicasteries saying that people who are better qualified to speak to children may preach the homily at masses for children, and that would be the opportunity for a lay person, specifically women who are most of the catechists, to preach.
Phyllis, one of the questions in the chat is, since there is a history of the diaconate for women in the church, why is this taking so long, and why can't women be accepted more with the current church hierarchy?
I think those 2 questions, Jim, and why is it taking so long? The Holy Father is not an autocrat, and he is genuine about this business of walking together, of synodality. He is moving very slowly, but he's moving very deliberately. On January 10th, as I said earlier, he did the motu proprio spiritus domini, which said that women can be, any lay person can be installed as a lector or acolyte. And now more recently, he has promulgated another motu proprio with the installed ministry of catechist. I haven't really read up that closely on the arguments for the diaconate in the Second Vatican Council, but I know that one of them was to strengthen the ministry of catechists through the charism of order. So I can't speak for the Holy Father, but I can say he's not disingenuous. I think he's very serious about having a real discussion about it. And as I said in my own breakout room, one person, 2 people, maybe could get together and be phonies the way they reacted to me in Rome. But I can't imagine that there were 10 people or 20 people having meetings in the basement deciding that they were all going to say the same thing. I think there is a genuine discussion, and it's serious discussion going on over there.
And there's another question. Can we hear Phyllis speak about that? I'm trying to find it. Oh yeah, has Dr. Zagano heard of the Discerning Deacons group that were introduced a few weeks ago?
Sure. Discerning Deacons launched on Vocation Sunday. It's headed by a team of 3 people: Luke Hansen in California, Casey Stanton in North Carolina, and Ellie Hidalgo in Miami, Florida. And I'm not part of their team, but they are. I know them, and I'm always available to them for fact checking. They've got a lot of energy, and they're real, and they are genuinely interested in the diaconate. I can tell you, I do a Zoom actually tomorrow night. The last one, Sister Colleen Gibson will host with me alone, and we will then hand it over to Luke Hansen, who on June 16th will interview me to kick off his Discerning Deacons lecture series, which he intends and they intend to have as a educative discussions with all sorts of people about the history of women deacons and the pastoral need and things like that. We had a testimony. If you look on my webpage, there was a testimony from Kayla August, who is a residence hall director at Notre Dame. She'll be going to Boston College in the fall, but about her call to the diaconate. So, you know, I think they're a good crowd. I think it's important. The Holy Father wants this question discussed, and that's to me is the most hopeful and the most important. I can't tell the Bishop of Pittsburgh that he needs to have women deacons, but I can tell him that there is no law against women being ordained as deacons. The extrapolation is from Canon 1024 that only a baptized male is validly ordained, but the history of that canon really comes from the priesthood. It speaks to the priesthood. And
I guess one of the questions wants to know, like, how long does this process take, the discernment process? Is there, you know, a fixed time? You know, I guess we're all impatient.
Well, everybody's impatient. You know, you're really listening for the Spirit. And I know the Holy Father, means that genuinely. It's a question of the movement of the Spirit in the church. And it may not happen all at once around the world. When the diaconate rolled out as a permanent vocation after Vatican II, individual bishops' conferences had to discuss the matter. And then they asked Rome and said, can we have deacons? Well, I think the same thing would happen in the United States. Can we have women deacons? But then it's up to individual bishops. So it really redounds to your own bishop in the long run, whether you'll have women deacons or not. And that depends on whether he thinks you need women deacons or not. I've talked to bishops in Africa who said they'd hire women deacons in a minute. You know, they need them. The bishops of Cambodia and Thailand said that they would love to have male or female deacons, but they didn't have the educated peoples to train to be deacons. So it's different around the world. South America, I think, is ready. The Amazon region is very ready for it. But the Holy Father skipped over it in Queer Amazonia. He went rather to Canon 517, paragraph 2, parish life coordinators, who are mostly sisters. He said, professionalize these sisters. And then if they have vocation of the diaconate, fine. If they don't have vocation of the diaconate, fine. But he didn't say, let's ordain the married deacons now, because what happens when you have a priest appear on the scene, all of a sudden the assumption is he's got to be the one in charge. And I think the Holy Father is trying to actually redesign the church so that we recognize the good and holy priests as sacramental ministers, but not necessarily the fellows who have to worry about the roof. And that takes time. Time is greater than space here, I think. And it's good to, as the Holy Father said in his audience today, it's good to get angry. You know, the child keeps saying, why to daddy? Why? You know? And that's to get the Father's attention. And that's where it comes back and redounds to prayer. Why? Why is this taking so long?
Dr. Phyllis, we had a question about the issue of infallibility of our prophetic voices and like how long until that collective voice becomes infallible, and who determines that?
Well, you know, there's the ordinary and the extraordinary magisterium, and it's what the church has always taught. And then the extraordinary magisterium of ex cathedra comments. What the Second Vatican Council said was that the people of God cannot err in matters of belief. And I think, again, we have to, you know, we're coming to Pentecost time. We have to depend on the Spirit here and to recognize that good people will know when they're being misled. Good people will know when they're being misled. So if some, like, for example, with catechists, you know, I don't see a lot of pushback against the Holy Father's decision to institute catechists, to have it as a formally installed office. That's a very big deal. I don't see much pushback on his installing lectors, women as lectors and acolytes. How long does it take? I mean, that was a recommendation in 2008 of a synod. And we had, how long do women deacons take, as Jim asked before? In 1987, Cipriano Vagagini said to a synod of bishops, he was a great historian. He said there was no reason not to have women ordained as deacons as they were in the past. And Vagagini had written a document in 1974 at the request of Paul VI, asking about women deacons. And his answer was, yes, that's true. And so the conversation has been there. It's kind of been clouded over the years by the conversation about women priests, which is a wholly different discussion. But there's a ton of historical documentation of the ordination of women as deacons. And that's key, because the question is, why can't a woman be ordained? Well, a woman can't be ordained because she can't image Christ. Well, excuse me, that's heretical. I don't know if I have my book. Yeah, I do. I actually wrote a whole book. I thought I had it here. I don't. Women Icons. Oh, yeah, it is. Women Icons of Christ, Paulist Press book. I was seated, here's the book. I was seated at table with an official of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. And I said, why can't women be ordained as deacons? He said, women can't be ordained, can't image Christ. I said, watch me. You know, that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard in my life, because we're all made in the image and likeness of God. I can't image the male Jesus, but if you look at me and you can't see the Christ, then you need to get another job, because you can tell I was really popular in some quarters over there. But anyway.
Well, I just have to say from everyone, thank you. Thank you for your witness. Thank you for sharing this with us and making us better, challenging us really, you know, sort of live up to, our baptismal call, basically. We were kind of ended, we finished the questions. I don't know if you have some words that you want to sum up the talk for us or leave us with tonight. It's up to you.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm sorry I'm not in Pittsburgh. And it's really very, it's very encouraging, to me, to have people who are out there thinking and talking and praying about these questions. As I said earlier, John Osley sent me your book, or the history of your book, of your organization. And, many of your issues are not my issues, but the fact that you would take these issues prayerfully and bring them to the fore. You asked me earlier about discerning deacons. That's what those kids are doing, those young people are doing. They're taking the issue and bringing it to the people in the pews. The problem is, and people who work for me and with me tell me this, that a lot of people don't even know this conversation is going on. And yet when you tell them about it, they're like, well, that's of course, it's very simple. The first time I went to Rome, a friend of mine who's a Delta stewardess told a friend of hers of the aircraft I was going to be on. And when I got on the aircraft, I was greeted by the friend and a steward. And then later, during the flight, I was in the back getting a soda or something. And here I am at 35,000 feet listening to a steward on Delta Airlines giving me a lecture on why women should be deacons. And I was like, okay, but he never heard of it before. I explained to him what the conversation was. He said, well, of course, people who funded me said the same thing. A major Wall Street individual, he said, if people want to work, it's crazy, hire them. And I say this to bishops all the time, you either train, ordain, and give faculties to the women who work for you, or you don't. That's your choice, because they're working for you anyway. And I think that I think good people know the difference. You know, this, in my reflection about the topic you've asked me to discuss, as I said earlier, the law, you know, they're like, it's like training wheels, and, you know, or keeps us from going over the cliff, driving too fast. And I think that as we, if we pray about these matters and listen to the voice of the Spirit, we can recognize the tinny voice, the tinny voice, right, left, or center. That's not in keeping with the infallibility of believers. You know in your heart when people are saying something that's just a little off, and when it's a lot off, you know right away. But the task is to listen to things that are just a little bit off. So anyway, I pray for you and hope you pray for me, and thank you for your encouragement of me. And I hope I can encourage you to continue to do what you do.
And we do thank you for your willingness to really speak out about what you have discerned for the good of the church. That's, you know, that really is huge and very much appreciated. As you talk about the kids who are, you know, leading discerning deacons with great energy, they benefit greatly from your scholarship and your credibility. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it rings true to me. Your message tonight rang true to me. So, and you did a great job leading us into our closing announcements, which is about discerning deacons that we talked a little bit about. It's a national organization, and we're sharing the email of discerning deacons with you. And also wanted to let everyone here know that a member of CCOC, Catholics for Change in Our Church, here in Pittsburgh, Jack Klingler, sorry, Jack, I know you're on the call, I apologize. He is one of the local coaches, a regional coach of 12 in the country to kind of build up this program that's going to be happening over the summer. And again, I encourage you all to look at the website if you want to learn more. Jack, you can email Jack. He's really happy to talk about it. And we will be sharing more about this on social media and through some emails coming up this summer. So we are taking a little break in the speaker series, and our next session, again, is something we talked about this evening, will be by Bishop John Stowe. He's the Bishop of Lexington. He is also the president of the United States Pax Christi, and he's going to be talking about what is near and dear to Pope Francis's heart, synodality, and that talk is sponsored by the Association of Pittsburgh Priests and Catholic or Pathways to Lay Leadership. Okay, you can still put things in the chat if you want, but I just want to introduce Jerry Lococo, and Jerry is the faith leader of Sunday's Bread. She will soon be ordained into that church, I think in the fall, I heard. So Jerry, if you don't mind closing us with prayer.
Thank you. O Holy One, we thank you for bringing us together with Dr. Zagano this evening. Bless us as we unite our talents and energy to make changes for the good of our church. As church, we seek your guidance for all our words and actions. May our relationships be supportive, renewing, informative, and challenging for each of us. Thank you for the wisdom and encouragement we receive from one another. May we continue to grow together and to lead others to grow toward all we are created to be in your divine image. Through the intercession of St. Phoebe, we pray for the ministry of deacons, for the Papal Commission on the Female Diaconate, and for the Church to receive women as ordained ministers. And so as we take leave this evening, may we open our minds to unending conversation. May we open our vision to imagination. May we open our lives to transformation, and may we join in the Spirit's new creation, now and always. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank everyone here. Thanks again, Phyllis, for inspiring us, encouraging us, witnessing, to the faith. We appreciate it.